In this test, there are 3 parts with 20 questions. The listening sections measures your ability to understand the conversations or lectures in English. You will hear a conversation or lecture only once time. After each recording, you will have some following questions about it. Answer the questions based on the speaker. State or imply. Remember, each recording will start with a sound. Beef. Now open the paper and look at the first part. First, you will have some time to look at questions 1 to 7. Now, we're ready to start. Listen and answer questions 1 to 7.
Yes, the birch tree has white bark, and this tough, protective outer layer of the tree, this white bark, is waterproof. And this waterproof quality of the bark, it made it useful for making things like cooking containers, a variety of utensils. And if you peel birch bark in the winter, we call it the winter bark.
I've just got back from the Alps. Lots of the mountain passes that are normally full of snow at this time of year are still green. If this is the result of global warming, it's very worrying.
There are certainly strange things happening to the weather, but there's nothing to worry about really. My sister spent 2 weeks in Cape Town last year, where she'd hoped to find big waves and plenty of winter surf, and she was shocked to find nothing. I went 2 weeks ago, and it was a completely different story.
I can't believe that you're saying that. There's no hope for our planet unless something's done soon.
Well, there are 2 campsites about 5 kilometres apart, but I'd go to the Morvich site if I were you. Unless you want to be near the castle and the museum, which are a fair distance from it even if you're driving. All we wanted was to be able to go for walks and enjoy the stunning views of the lake. You definitely wouldn't get that at the other site. Though I've heard that the showers are better than at Morvich, and it's also got a little shop which you may find useful. We don't bother about things like that, so we'll definitely go back to Morvich next summer.
Did you see the advert on the college notice board about weekend jobs in the kitchens?
Yes, but I really wanted something that's related to my studies, that would look good on my CV. Mind you, it would get me out of the house and give me something a bit less serious to do. And of course, it would help to have the extra money, what with the fees and the books I need this term.
I'm lucky not to have that problem. But I like the idea of meeting people. That really sounds fun, and I don't think we should be worrying about our career prospects.
As soon as you start an exercise program, you'll start looking healthier. And if you keep it up, you'll see the difference in the mirror within a few weeks. Forget the scales, they're not a good way of telling if you're losing body fat. Replacing fat with muscle makes you look better, but it may actually increase your weight, as muscle weighs more. So just look in the mirror and enjoy the improvement. And don't be fooled by the usual fad diets telling you to cut out sugar or bread. None of them work, and some people think they're downright dangerous.
I'm in 2 minds about selling my flat. I'll be working at home from next month, and there's no way I can fit a desk and all my files in here. And I could choose to live anywhere, really. Distance from the office will no longer be an issue. But it's so gorgeous in summer when it's hot. With the windows open, you can look out over the rooftops all around you. And you'd think it would be noisy with all the traffic down below, but as soon as you close the window,
Jane, great to see you on your bike. So at last you've left your car at home.
Well, it's not for the reasons you think. I've put the car up for sale. On my student income, it just didn't work. I know. Don't start lecturing me about car fumes, the ozone layer, the polluted air we breathe. Look at the state I'm in after a quarter of an hour of cycling. Exhausted and cold. Who knows, I might have caught flu or something.
If you're ill, you shouldn't be doing this, of course.
Now, you will have some time to review your answers. That is the end of part 1. Now, you have some time to look at part 2. Questions from 8 to 11. Listen to part of an interview with a man called David Shaw, who is a professional ceramicist, making pottery objects out of clay, and choose the best answer to answer questions 8 to 11. You will hear the recording once only. Now we're ready to start. Listen and answer questions 8 to 11.
David, a career in ceramics seems so attractive. Is that a realistic picture?
Well, for some it's just a job, for others it's a love affair. But in all cases, it's crucial you do things at the right stage. Nothing can be rushed. If you're the sort of person who can't wait, then this isn't for you. I start by getting all the air bubbles out of the clay. Next, I throw the clay, that's the word we use, I shape it on a wheel, before leaving it to harden. When it's fully dry, I fire it in a kiln at a high temperature, then glaze it before firing it again. It's physical work. There's lots of slapping the clay and putting pressure on it. You feel tired by the end of the day, but you shouldn't let that put you off.
And it takes time to become a really good artist.
Well, you've got to be determined. I was apprenticed for over 2 years to another potter, and very soon I was making the sort of shapes that have become a distinctive feature of my pieces. It was relatively easy for me to find my own voice. Not so with the financial side of it, though. That was a steep learning curve, and for years I was barely making enough to survive, even though I was putting in long days.
So, what's the best part of your job?
I like the way that you don't know exactly what's going to come out of the kiln, because the firing process affects each piece differently. There are other pleasures, but nothing equals that feeling. I still love seeing the finished pots, that I've achieved something tangible. It's also nice to hear people's positive responses. People tell me that they use my cups and dishes every day.
And the most difficult?
Well, I have to do everything. All the paperwork, for example. It's not hard work in itself, don't get me wrong. In fact, at times it provides a welcome break from making pots. But it eats up valuable time. If I don't plan my days very carefully, things don't get done. Because I also need to look at new projects, come up with fresh initiatives, and that's the toughest part of the job. But I'm always keen to fulfill whatever I promise a client. I hate to keep people waiting.
Recently, you've been very successful. Why do you think that is?
Yes, I've just designed a dinner service for a famous shop, and I must say it's rare for a potter to do that. It so happened that they were looking for a dinner service in the classical style I do, and I think I was in the right place at the right time. Most potters work on their own, and their money comes from exhibitions. They mostly work extremely hard, Some also teach.
Have you ever considered teaching?
I have, and recently I had a very tempting offer from one of the best art colleges in this area. They wanted me to teach 1 morning a week a special ceramics workshop. It was just a few hours, and it would have given me a different experience. I declined the offer because, yes, I have the knowledge and experience, but I have no teaching qualification. The college principal said I'd pick it up easily enough, but I wasn't convinced.
So, finally, what would you say to a young person who wants a career in ceramics?
Don't believe people who tell you you can do it all yourself. You could go to art school and do a degree in ceramics, but there are also night classes and adult education courses. If you decide you want to do it, focus on it and don't let yourself lose direction. The physical skills develop through practice. You've got to stick with it. You learn to attune your visual sense so you can look at the curves of an object and see what looks good and what doesn't, until you can develop your own style. Have self-belief and be proud of your work.
David, many thanks.
Now, you will have some time to look at questions 12 to 15. Now you are going to listen to a part of a conversation between a student and a professor, talking about a geological matter, and choose the best answer for questions 12 to 15. You will hear the recording once only.
Hi, Professor Reynolds.
Oh, hi, Jeff. I just read your note. You wanted to talk about something?
Yeah, just an idea I have. I've been thinking, I was reading about what's been going on with those houses on Fox Point.
You mean the slide?
Yeah, that's right. The paper said a few days ago there was only one house that was affected, but this morning there was another article saying there were lots more houses involved than they previously thought. Maybe as many as 15 or 20 homes. A couple of houses have big cracks in the foundation.
I read the article too. It seems like nothing but bad news for the homeowners.
Yeah, my old boss lives out there on Fox Point. I don't know if his house is one that's affected. Anyway, I was sort of thinking I could write a paper on it. I remember how in your Intro to Geology course we studied gravity movements. I thought maybe the slide on Fox Point was a case of subsidence. When the Earth sinks because there's a weakening of support, I was thinking this might be an example of settlement.
Settlement happens from the more or less gradual compacting of underlying material. For example, when wet soil at the surface dries and shrinks and creates a depression. It can also happen when frozen ground melts.
In class, you talked about the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yes, the settlement that's caused the Tower of Pisa to lean is due to the failure of a clay layer beneath it. Engineers have been working on it for decades, but still haven't been able to stop the process.
There was another kind of settlement you talked about, when groundwater's removed.
Yes, that's what happened in the San Joaquin Valley in California. Part of the valley floor sank 30 feet because of the removal of groundwater for irrigation. But the problem on Fox Point may not be subsidence at all. This probably has more to do with the slope and with the amount of rain we've been having lately.
So it's just a regular old mudslide, not like the Leaning Tower?
It's probably not like the Leaning Tower.
The article did say the houses were on a slope, but it's only slight. It's not steep at all.
Mudslides are most common on intermediate slopes, 27 to 45 degrees, because these slopes are gentle enough for sediment to accumulate and steep enough for sliding. One suggestion I have is to take a look at the county's website. There's a page on the geology of the region. This area has a history of slides. There was one on Johnson Island about 10, 12 years ago.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Maybe there's a connection.
Possibly. It's an idea to work on.
Well, this gives me a place to start. Thanks, Professor Reynolds. I appreciate your input.
Now, you will have some time to review your answers. This is the end of part 2. Now, you will have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. You are going to listen to a part of lecture in a linguistics class and choose the best answer. Now we are ready to start.
Let's see. You may recall last class when some of you were a little, indignant, shall we say, about being marked on your pronunciation. You felt that it's unfair for me to, assess your Latin pronunciation, given that we can't really know how the ancient Romans actually pronounced it. Well, I want to spend today's lecture explaining why we actually have a pretty good idea of how to pronounce Latin the way the Romans did. First of all, Latin spelling was a lot different from English spelling in this respect. They followed the rules. The Latin alphabet was originally phonetic, meaning that each symbol represented one sound and one sound only. English has inherited so many different words and spellings from other languages, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the way we spell things. But Latin's kinda different because we can reasonably surmise that words were pronounced just as they were spelled. So this takes a lot of guesswork out of the language. But still, spelling doesn't include all of the keys to the pronunciation of a language. There are some things we can't tell from the written words alone, but luckily we have a few other clues. As one of you so aptly put last class, we can't very well ask an ancient Roman to come into class and speak, but what we can do is look at what they wrote about the pronunciation of their language. Indeed, education was a part of life in Rome, and language, particularly oration, was among the most important subjects. So, we have all kinds of detailed accounts of how the language was pronounced from their grammar books. Grammarians were actually very specific about the sounds of the language. Lucky for all of you! And as if that weren't enough, we've also got transcriptions to look at. When works were transcribed from Latin into Greek or Sanskrit, the transcribers were careful to specify how the words were pronounced.
This is the end of part 3. Now you will have 5 minutes to copy your answers into a separate answer sheet. This is the end of the comprehension listening test.